So welcome everybody. You would think that I would have this wired by now, but for some reason, I can't blame it on the smog in Los Angeles, but I always hit a couple hiccups with my being technologically challenged here as I am. But welcome, this is Dr. Craig Liebenson from Los Angeles, and I'm joined by a few students, Aaron from Minnesota, Geronimo from Florida. I'm joined by my colleague in arms out of New York City, the great physical therapist, Ryan Chow, and our very, very, very special guest, Rachel Balkovec, coming to us from somewhere in Utah. Aaron, you want to give us a few ground rules for everybody that's joining us now?
Yep. Welcome, everybody. So we'll be taking Q&A kind of as we go and at the end as well. Any questions that you have, if you find the Q&A icon at the top of your screen, you tap that and put any questions that you have in there. There is also a chat function, but we're not going to be pulling the questions from the chat, only from the Q&A. So any questions you have from Rachel, please direct to the Q&A. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Geronimo, anything you want to add? I know people don't hear your voice all the time here. Anything you want to emphasize?
Nope, just happy to see everybody here today. And yeah, put the questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them later.
Phenomenal. So I always like to start off throwing it to Aaron and Geronimo on a Saturday night a little over a month ago, maybe about 6 p.m. in Los Angeles time. These two young students said, "Hey, Craig, why don't you do a Zoom tomorrow? Or why don't you do a Zoom?" And I said, okay, should we start tomorrow? And so we've sold out each and every one of these, and this is our 6th. The last with Professor Lorimer Mosley was incredible. We changed our time, went Thursday, late in the day on the West Coast, so that it would be easier for the Asia Pacific region. And now we're back to our normally scheduled time. Next week, I'll be joined by Nick Winkleman from Ireland. Many of you know him from his Exos days. And then we'll have other guests coming on subsequent weeks. But I want to welcome everybody to our community. If you have questions, as Aaron suggested, please present them to us. Aaron, you want to say one more time where they should put the questions?
Yeah, so we have both a chat function and a Q&A function. Direct any and all questions to the Q&A, not the chat, because we'll be monitoring the Q&A and pulling questions from there and only there. Thanks, guys.
Cool. You can say anything you want about my hair, lack thereof, or anything else on the chat, but the team will filter the questions, meaning Geronimo and Aaron, and then give them to Ryan and I. So let's hit the ground running here. So I always like to start off with something COVID-19 appropriate.
Dreams that you could do so you could.
So that's a little alternate to milk in the morning as we start to lose our minds a little bit. And I think now that people are talking about a transition away from sheltering at home, we're getting a little antsy, especially if it's nice out where you are. And it reminds me of how wonderful it was out in Arizona in November. It was the 15th year that I've held programs in Arizona at Exos, Mark Verstegen's Performance Center. And Rachel Balkovec, my special guest today, was one of our fantastic guests there. With Artemis Scantolidis and Bob Alejo, as we bridge the gap between rehab and performance. And as you can see, the weather's always just amazing in the Phoenix area. And it was such a special weekend, Rachel. I'm so glad to have you join us in this virtual meeting. We have people from all over the world. We have people from Australia, from Argentina, from Chile, from Spain, from Italy, Giovanni, Ciao Giovanni, one of our special guests who had to leave his school in Davenport, Iowa, to return to northern Italy, to Verona, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're all gathering together, and there are all these unanticipated benefits to the reflection, to having this time, not just with our family, but also to learn new things and to look at things in a new way. And that's really what this is all about. We're talking about musculoskeletal, prehab and rehab, which has always been high value management for not just musculoskeletal pain, but also for performance enhancement and for resiliency. The prehab rehab model of teaching people what to do for themselves has always been the first rung on the ladder. It's always been our foundation, not things that we do to people, not things that we do with modalities or even with machines. We're learning, and we'll talk later with Rachel about how the New York Yankees might be trying to train now when they're sheltered at home. Many don't have home gyms. You have young players, you have minor leaguers from the Dominican Republic or other nations, and resources are limited. People, I just got a text just 5 minutes ago, patient of mine, oh, are you doing house calls? My neck is out. And I had people on our Facebook page saying, what can you do for headaches through telehealth? Don't you need to do manual therapy? We're looking at things with new lenses right now. We're not such specialists that we only see things one way. We're breaking and shattering the silos. We're challenging the status quo. And we're seeing things differently as Steve Jobs led us to see things and disrupted his industry. So we're really proud to have Rachel. And there you see her in her pinstripes. And Rachel, how does it feel to don the pinstripes?
It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, there's a little backstory behind that uniform there, and I'd like to share it. So there, actually, for my entire career, I barely wore any women's clothing because there was no women's clothing. And so when I was hired by the Yankees, I was introduced to a person at Nike, really high up in their apparel for all field sports. And I actually had an opportunity to go to Nike, and they fitted me for a women's uniform. So what you're seeing is actually a women's cut uniform, which is why the sleeves aren't down to my elbows and why there's like a little bit of fit there. So for a couple of reasons. First of all, that uniform is the first ever women's baseball uniform made by Nike. And then also, obviously, it's the pinstripes, it's the Yankees. So an organization that's, I think, really well known as being traditional, for them to make a really progressive move like that is even more, surprising, and I shouldn't say surprising, but is even there's even more credit due to the Yankees because they are such a traditional organization, or they're thought of as one. So pretty cool.
Wow. I knew you'd start us right off the bat with something kind of neat and unexpected. That's remarkable. Here we are back in November, probably half trainers, half clinicians, in the front row with me and Rachel, are Artemis and Bob, and of course Ryan. So it's just an amazing experience to meet together. None of the people there had heard you, Rachel, or knew Bob or Artemis, and we try to bring people together to kind of get us out of our comfort zones, get us to have to recalibrate a little bit. We all get into ruts, and I think it's just like training. If the stimulus isn't challenging enough, if there's no stress, if you're not at your edge, A, it's boring, and B, there's no adaptation. And in the rehab space, people want to stay in their comfort zone, and this often holds them back. So there's a lot of parallels between the performance world and how you create an environment that's conducive to change and growth and progress. And in rehab, how we change people's mindsets about how fragile they are. And I think that's really one of the subjects that we're going to get to pretty quickly here. But I've kind of set up a little bit of an outline for us. And I want to start with something that you really anchored us with, which is your love for learning about how to build culture. And I want to share a little clip from Phoenix.
That starts with you. I said yesterday, I'm not like, it's me too. Like I have limitations in my mindset too, but I said yesterday, everything's your fault. So if you don't like a behavior that's happening in your client or your athlete, you get what you tolerate. If you don't like a behavior that's going on with your boyfriend or your wife, you get what you tolerate. You have to create the environment. You have to set the standard yourself, within yourself, and then you can expect it of other people.
So I love that. Set the environment. And so often we think it's about us, and we think it's about our methods. We think it's about what we're going to do. It reminds me of Professor Mosley on Thursday saying it's not about what we teach. It's about what they learn. Do you want to amplify anything? Is that trigger some other thoughts for you that you want to kind of dive in on?
I mean, you started out with the word culture, and I think in the presentation in the fall, I said, I probably put up a lot of pictures of quotes, and the word culture is, I think, overused or needs to be broken down these days. And so, we have a great culture. What does that really mean? Is it that you have a quote on the wall that's like really inspiring? And I think that we're in an age where people understand that culture is important, but I'm not sure if everyone is really taking the necessary steps to make sure that they have a good culture, because it's not just like this esoteric, intangible thing. It's like your daily actions are going to set your culture. And before your actions comes your own personal character as people that make up your organization. So I think there's a lot more, there's a more clear curriculum than we think for creating a good culture. And I said there, and I think this is Craig's like favorite phrase, is everything's your fault. So if you don't like something that your employee is doing or one of the clients is doing, it's your fault. So either you haven't set a system in place, or you've set the systems in place and you have been so thorough with those systems that 95% of your clients or your athletes or your employees are doing what you're asking, and this one person isn't, and you're still allowing that behavior to be around, which means you either need to create a system just for that person, or that's just not a very good fit culturally for you, that person, and your organization.
Wow. I love it. I love it. The more we get from you, the better today, Rachel, because in reality, when we were in Arizona, I don't think anybody really expected all that we got a chance to get exposed to, because most of us aren't exposed to the groups the way that you are, or the team setting the way that you are. I mean, Aaron played baseball in college, and most of us are in clinics or in gyms, but these ideas about setting standards like that, they set the floor, and the floor, as you say, the minimum things that we tolerate, we have to really hold the line on those things, or what are we? Who are we? This is something that I pulled off of one of your feeds, and I put it with the Batman Alfred slide, which has been a recurrent theme for us. We have a guest here today, one of our past speakers, Matt Lowe, who joined Peter Stillwell a week or two ago. I think it was a week ago. The time is just not clicking for me anymore now that I've been locked in. But Matt is a physical therapist and a philosopher, and teaches us a lot about the interaction between the patient and their rehab specialist, and that space that is there between them. And I think it's a lot of the same things that Mark Verstegen probably impressed upon you at Athletes Performance before it became Exos. These ideas of culture are very steeped in the bones at Exos Athlete Performance. He's got his pillars of mindset and fuel and movement and recovery. Above it all, though, is the athlete-centered model, identifying through a deep immersion what the person's goals are, what their concerns are, what their key performance indicators are, where they are at the stage of their career, what's their training history, what injuries have they had, what positions do they play, what's their confidence level, what's their competition like. There are so many factors, and when I hear Mark talk about those things, it always seems to drive home how much he cares about identifying what a person's goals are. And here you say right off the bat, serving athletes. You're starting right off with serving athletes, but then you're still holding that line. It must not be confused with being their servant. Can you talk a little bit about how Mark influenced you at an earlier stage in your development, and how you see this conundrum where in the clinic, for instance, we start becoming fix-it people and we take care of everything instead of guiding by the side and empowering people?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so this is I wouldn't say that an athlete-centered model is what I first learned, and Exos definitely like influenced me. I think that's probably one of the first, if not the first, models of a performance facility that the athlete was in the gym, and then with no walls, there's the PT working on people, and you have the nutritionist, and all of them were sitting in the same office. And I was like, introduced to the world of performance in that model, which is how I viewed the world from that point forward, which kind of set me up for a little disappointment probably later in my career, once I realized that not everyone functioned like Exos, and the athletic training room is way over there, and the PT's not on site. So I think that was the first time, well, it was my first experience in strength and conditioning or in performance, and it was a beautiful one. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday about Mark, and they were saying how he's the most he is the most service-minded person they ever met. However, if you also know Mark, he's also a savage and a psycho. So he like has these really high standards paired with, but I'm also, if I have these really high standards, which is something I talked about in the fall, and I'll talk about again, is we want to give super amounts of support. And if I had a whiteboard, I would draw this, but basically I'll talk about the grit, which I think you're probably going to mention, Craig. Is Mark is a servant to the core, but he's also has these extremely high standards, and he pairs them together to create success in both his employees and his athletes. And so I think that where the pendulum is swinging to, we need to serve the athlete, being Alfred instead of Batman, which I love that slide. We need to serve the athlete. Yes, of course. But let's not go too far that way. 'Cause we say, right, what makes up our culture? Discipline. We want to be warriors. We want, whatever's on your wall and in your quote, but like, how can they possibly be disciplined and self-sufficient when we're handing them everything? Or as you said, Craig, like they're on the table and we're doing treatment to them, and we're not teaching them why, and we're not teaching them how to do it at home. So when a pandemic hits, they can still take care of themselves without us. This, again, like you said, Craig, just looking through a different lens, like, whoa, our patients have been so dependent, or our athletes or whoever have been so dependent on us. And then all of a sudden everyone's forced to go home, and we're screwed because we've been serving them completely. We've been serving it on a platter instead of really forcing them to be self-sufficient. So going back to, I started to talk about the wise parenting. You want me to talk about this later? Because I think grit is in there somewhere, the book, or I can.
Yeah, we can loop it back in. Yeah, well, I have that coming up too. So a lot of the things that you talk about are so consistent and interlocked that we could talk about, why we should lift weights and why we shouldn't overcorrect, or arm health and the role of bands, or how to look at the body as a functional unit instead of breaking it into parts. The beautiful synchrony in a principle-based approach is that you can enter anywhere. And then we can riff and get to the same place. So we'll come back to that in just a sec. But I love hearing you talk about Mark and his ideas about being savage. He does, like he walks in the room at Perform Better and he goes, "Who wants to train?" It's go time. Like he just steps in, and his gaze, the lasers coming out of his eyes, they tell you all you need about intent. And I know Ryan is with us from New York, Ryan Chow, and I've gotten to know a great coach in DC, Darius Gilbert. And Darius was one of the first RKC instructors for Pavel Tsatsouline. And Darius just brings the energy. So I'll teach an 18-hour class, and with Darius at his facility, used to be in DC, now it's in Alexandria. And it's just amazing when we hit any kind of plateau, and over 18 hours, we're not by any stretch always, on a high note. We just go to the Darius card, and he just brings the heat for 20, 25 minutes, and the place is electric for the next, the rest of the afternoon. Ryan, do you want to talk for a second about the savageness of training to get results? And obviously, you can't always be in that gear, but can you share a little bit about the mindset of intent during training that Darius has imparted to our FPM groups?
Yeah, it's something that he has a talent for doing, which I'm trying to develop and teach also, is that if people understand why they're doing what they're doing, if people understand how much energy they have to bring to every single exercise and every single rep, you get so much more out of the person, not only from a physiology standpoint, but when people, what he told us this last seminar was, the common saying is for coaches is, if you don't know why you're doing that exercise, you have to take it out of your program, because you're just wasting reps and time and all that stuff. But he took it a step further. He said, well, I actually want my athletes to tell me why we're doing the exercise, because that's coming back to what Rachel's kind of saying in this slide is, if you teach the athlete or the client to be self-sufficient, if they have the understanding of why they're doing an exercise, why they have to be fast here or tight there or explosive, they understand what they're training, then you get the most out of every rep. You feel accomplished. It builds self-efficacy. It really, it trains the person to really give it their all. And that's probably the hardest thing to manage in people, is the buy-in and the intent. And obviously from a physiologic standpoint, I do so many most of my career, I've done so many low intensity exercises to create mobility and stability. And then the other day he's like, if you do sets of 1s, 2s, and 3s with maximum intent, and you challenge that stability as kind of like 1 RMs, that's, I realize that a lot of times people aren't getting that amount of intensity in their, let's say, split stance. If you're dropping into a split stance with speed, with power, you're gonna get that stability. You're gonna get that mobility in a way that the low intensity stuff doesn't get. So I feel like it's multi-layered. It just hits it on all levels, and that's a skill and a talent that I think I've seen all good coaches have.
That's awesome.
I think
Ryan.
just to jump in really quickly, and because Craig, you said this earlier and you just touched on it, Ryan, is the way that I approach creating a physical program is the way that I approach creating the mental program or the culture or the mindset or whatever. And as you said, it's Craig, the same way that I believe in having robust training, for athletes so that they are more resilient, is the same way that you should treat them mentally, so that they have to be mentally challenged. And also for your employees and your business, it's you don't want your employees to not know what to do when you're not there, unless you want to work 18-hour days for the rest of your life. That's totally fine. But we have to create a situation where they are self-sufficient and they're not afraid to explore, even if that means high intensity or something, again, mentally or physically. This is not that was a great example, Ryan, of dropping into a split squat with intent, with real explosive intent, and then doing jumps and explosive movements and high intensity work is going to be so much more bang for your buck. And also it's going to create more confidence. What creates more confidence? Laying on your back and doing a bird dog, or doing body weight or whatever, or jumping, and what really feels like you're creating confidence, or I should say that you're creating capability. Probably the higher intensity work when it's appropriate and when you've worked them to that point, which if you haven't, it's your fault. So everything's our fault, right?
You always go back to that. I like the turn on the phrase of confidence to building capability.
Capability
and ability and rehab are all the same. And these patients that think they can't get help for their headache or their neck pain because only manual therapy will work, that's our fault. That's our fault for being Batman all along. which is easy. It's an ego thing though. Like we feel so good as a clinician or even as a coach. Like Pavel Satselin also says, leave your correctives outside of my gym. Like the trainers that are managing people away from load because, oh, they see all these subtle things and then they do all these subtle correctives. I know with Matt Lowe, we're going to talk about this in 2 weeks, but motor control training is not skill acquisition, and motor control and motor learning are not the same. Motor learning is where people learn, they learn. We create the environment with constraints, and we challenge them at their edge in relatable ways, in relevant ways where we can explain the why behind the what. Motor control is like an end in itself. And so we forget about the goal, which is what Mark Verstegen says we start from. What is their goal? It's athlete-centered. We are serving them. And that's where we'll get that buy-in so that they'll give the E effort, the E energy that Jair Lee talks about at Exos. So we're only a couple slides in. We could just go on and on, Rachel, and this is good stuff. I really appreciate your coming. And I know there are things here, not just for the trainers and coaches. This is for all of us in the clinical realm as well. So here's you just hammering the point home. Everything is your fault. You set the environment. And this is inspired from Lorimer Moseley just the other day, talking about chronic pain. It's not about what you teach, it's about what they learn. We think we have to teach them about biomechanics and what the herniated disc is and how to spare their spine. But really what we need to do is make people feel less fragile and have more self-efficacy so they can move forward. And here's my great mentor from Prague, Dr. Carol Levitt. This is a photograph from shortly after the Berlin Wall fell. So in 1990, the Berlin Wall fell, and within 2 months, I was in Prague. Here he is at his clinic at what was called the Central Railway Health Institute. And he would spend a half hour with each person before he examined them, just getting their story. Learning their goals, their fears, their worries, their concerns, their history. And history is story, right? History. And so he said, our method should serve the goals. And we shouldn't be a slave of our methods. So Dr. Carol Levitt was always an inspiring person, an open-minded person. He said that we should keep an open mind for new ideas that sometimes show what we thought or believed before was wrong. And I think this speaks volumes to a subject that we're going to get into in a few minutes that's dear to you, Rachel, which is about failure tolerance. And that's a trait not just of the humble, but it's a trait of the savagely successful. Mark certainly sets the stage for people learning from each other and ongoing evolution, which hopefully now is happening at a faster rate than ever before because of the constraint of the COVID virus. So here I want to show another video. It's just so nice in Arizona. I can't show enough of these, Rach.
Oh, no. Then you got to take a hard look in the mirror and say, when I say, because I say these things too sometimes, I'm like, oh shit, like just, you heard me talk earlier. I never want to put it on the athletes not being able to learn something. If I can't get an athlete to learn something, it's my fucking fault. You said it's your fault. If you can't get the athlete to learn something that somebody else can teach, well, maybe it's your fault. Maybe if you are considering incorporating a Turkish get-up and you think it's too complicated to teach, maybe you should just get better at teaching the Turkish get-up. Or admit it and say, you know what, we don't teach the Turkish get-up because I'm just not that good at it, which is probably not good. So you probably better take that. Just had to go on that little tangent. I'm going to start my. All
right. So we obviously really drop F-bombs, and that's a trademark at FPM. It's not first principles of movement, Ryan, anymore. F man. For a lot of different things. So you've shared this, culture precedes winning. It doesn't get tacked on as an afterthought on the way to the victory stand from Bill Walsh. So obviously successful organizations have a leg up, but how did they get successful in the first place? And here's another one from Rachel.
That's how you can affect your clients better. That's how you can become a better mentor. So when I hear you guys ask these questions sometimes, like, well, what do I do if I have this person? It already kind of tells me that you're thinking that person can't do it. It already kind of tells me that. You shouldn't even worry about that. Those words that thought shouldn't even come to your mind. You're looking at this person as if they're limited, instead of looking at this person as if like they have a fucking infinite ceiling.
All right, Rach, another F-bomb. I love that. Don't look at them like they're limited. So what do you mean by that?
So in professional baseball specifically, I was talking about, and I'm happy to share here that like I've worked with Latin American players for a really long time. I would say like 70% of the work that I've done is with a lot of like young Latin players, and I hear consistently. So I'm sure, I imagine like in your own facility or own place, wherever you are, you have a certain group of clientele that you're like, oh, you know, the soccer mom, or like, oh, the, you know, whatever. Like there's some group of clientele that the industry probably looks at and goes, oh, like they can't do this, they're annoying because of this, whatever. And I just was talking about here, I think it's just, we have to provide the expansive mindset to the client or the athlete. Like they're not gonna, a lot of times they walk in, they go, I'm injured, I've had this surgery, I've got a bad home life, I've had that. They walk in with their limitations, and you cannot let them breathe their limitations into your thought process about them. I have to look at every single person that walks in the door as if they are the most capable person ever, because first of all, that's how I'm going to treat them. It's how I'm going to program for them. It's how I'm going to talk to them. It's how I'm going to look at them. It's how my body language is going to be when they walk through the door. I go, yes, let's train, instead of like, you look away and you're like, okay, breathe. I got to prepare for this person. No, like it's going to change everything of how you act. And then when you act as if they are an expansive person with an expansive mind, the ability to learn. When you act towards them like that, it's going to defeat whatever limiting beliefs they have about themselves, especially because you're the coach, you're the clinician, you're the authority figure in that situation, hopefully, and they're coming to you for help. Hopefully, whatever mindset that you have about them, they're going to take on over time. It's going to take a while for them to stop saying, well, I had this surgery, or, well, I had this injury when I played 20 years ago. Well, fill in the blank, whatever limiting belief they had about themselves, they're going to stop thinking that because you've set the tone. So I think in this video, I hear all the time, it's like, well, I have this person who fill in the blank. Like, yes, I don't think I put this in the presentation in the fall, but I added this. And when I gave it to a bunch of professional baseball people, we are in a snowflake focused society. So when I say that, I mean everyone is a special snowflake, and we're very in tune with psychology, and that is so awesome and so important. However, if treat everyone like a special snowflake, that's what they'll be. So we have also realized that there are foundational principles of behavioral psychology that apply to almost every human being out there, regardless of what their situation is. So we have to provide them. And like at the very base, by the way, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety needs. So I'm not going to die. So they walk into your clinic and it's clean. It feels like a safe environment. There's, they're not going to get tetanus, right? They walk into the clinic and they're like, I'm safe here, literally, physically. But the next step, which we forget about or we get wrong, it's actually called safety needs, which I think is a horrible title. The next step of that safety needs is actually like, I would call it structure needs. So people need to know what boundaries they have. And that when you're a kid and you're learning what to do. First of all, don't cross the street. Cars are going to hit you. You're going to die. Okay, great. Now you're safe. But how close can I get to the street without mom or dad getting upset with me? Okay, like I have to set boundaries. Or what time can I get home at night without mom or dad getting upset at me for getting home too late? So the boundaries, the next level, the structure, this is how it's going to go. You walk into the clinic, we do not talk about how you surgery 20 years ago that's limiting you. We have to let go of that belief. I don't even want to hear about it. We've acknowledged it. We've acknowledged that you are a special snowflake because you've had 13 surgeries. Let's acknowledge that. That's appropriate. Okay. You're a special snowflake. You've had 13 surgeries and your dog died last week. That's what makes you special. But guess what? Your body doesn't know that your dog died last week. Your mind knows that, and it's affecting your body. Your body probably doesn't even know, it doesn't know that you've had 13 surgeries and no one else has. It's going to adapt. It's going to continue to adapt. The body will adapt to the demands that you put on it. So that is a principle that you can apply to every human body and every single person in the entire world. I don't care what kind of special snowflake you are. So I think that we are, again, the pendulum has swung to like, we need to serve this person. And it is athlete centered. That's why you do the intake questions. That's why you do understand. So if it's a little harder for them to break that habit of thought, if it's a little harder for them to feel comfortable jumping, you just understand why. You have empathy towards that situation, but it doesn't mean that you also go, yeah, my client's had 13 surgeries, so we can't squat them anymore. Well, how do you know that? How do you know that? And again, look, there are outliers to every situation. So I know someone in their mind is going, well, actually, I have this client that really, I get it, right? There's an outlier to every situation, but I don't think that we are applying the principles of the outlier snowflake to the masses instead of going, well, that guy or girl, that person is really an outlier and they've got like bone on bone grinding level 10 pain. We're not going to squat them. They're probably getting surgery anyway at that point, right? But like that outlier is not the person I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 80 to 90% of people that can probably handle more adaptation than we're giving them based off of what limiting beliefs we're putting on them as coaches or what limiting beliefs that we are accepting from them as coaches. I've had 13 surgeries. Dog died last week. I come into training. I'm going to challenge you. Come into training if your dog died. Come in, because I bet you're going to feel better. I'm not going to say, oh, okay, stay at home. I'm saying your dog died. You fill in the blank. I'm not going to come into training because whatever. I'm tired. Well, actually stay at home right now because of COVID, but normally like I fill in the blank, challenge them to reach a little bit beyond what they think is possible. And then you might give them a new idea of what is actually possible.
That's amazing. It reminds me a little bit about Peter Crone's work. He's a kind of a mind architect and sports psychologist. And he talks about if we keep trying to solve problems, then we lose the opportunity to dissolve them. And overcoming some of these things by moving beyond them and realizing our infinite potential, will free us to stop managing people away from load and just doing corrective exercises and begin to acknowledge and train and program and rehab consistent with what we know about physiology, which is that tissues adapt. In 90 days, there's a turnover rate in nearly every tissue of the body. So 50 is the new 50. We're not old at 50 because we're 50. That's in our mind. These labels that people get about bone on bone are usually inaccurate. When somebody's told, oh, learn to live with it, it's wear and tear. And then the physical therapist manages them away from load because the doctor told them to rest. This just sets people up for failure, and it's not consistent with the science. If we science the shit out of it, then we know that there's cortical plasticity. And Professor Mosley on Thursday talked a lot about this, Rachel. He said, everybody's got a different sweet spot. Our job is to find that sweet spot. And it's somewhere between too little, too late, and too much, too soon. But if we keep managing people away from load, we reinforce the fragilista mindset. So let's go forward into more about these growth mindsets. You said we do a marginally good job of developing the body, but a below average job of developing the mind. And that's what I hear you talking about right now. Don't be disappointed by finding a gaping hole in your repertoire. Just noticing that you are behind likely puts you 10 steps ahead of most people. Ryan, you started us off with a quote from the futurist Alvin Toffler. You want to share the quote from our last lab immersion?
I think it goes something like the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who can't read and write, but it's those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Yeah.
I love that.
Wow, that's great.
And he wrote a book, Future Shock, I think back in like 1970. But your next line, you want to tell us about this one? Feeling stupid should be comforting.
I mean, sometimes well, because people ask me like, oh, how did you become a hitting coach for the New York Yankees? And it's really just feeling stupid for a decade, like anytime that you feel you're in a situation, and again, this applies to physical training and mental processes, is like anytime you feel comfortable, you should be worried. But the problem is that most people don't have the self-awareness to like turn the camera around or look into the mirror and go, ooh, wait a second, like this is too easy for me. And that's evolution. We want to feel comfortable. We want homeostasis. We don't want, like, our body is meant for survival. It's not meant to put ourselves into situations where we're going to die. So if you don't feel like you're going to die, your body's like, or your internal native systems are like, great, you're doing a good job. Stay right here because I don't want stress because I'm going to die. So we're trying to, the human race, we're trying to preserve ourselves essentially, like without even knowing it. So we're built almost for mediocrity from a physiological standpoint, for sure, because our body wants to slow down, or our body wants to stay in that homeostasis point. So to push yourself out of that point, both from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint, is really difficult. But the first thing you have to do is even be aware that you're comfortable, And so I don't love COVID, but I just love situations like this where globally we are forced to be out of our comfort globally. When's the last time that we've globally collectively felt very similar things? Maybe World War II, but maybe not even then, because the countries that were involved, we're globally being pushed out of our comfort zone. And I think only now maybe we're looking at our businesses, our relationships, because we're spending more time with our family, our fitness level, because we're forced to be creative and we don't have things set up for us, and we don't have gyms and we don't have our coaches. Like, we are forced to be out of our comfort zone for the first time ever globally. And I just love that this is happening. I don't love that it's happening, but I love I'm seeing the positive side of this for sure.
What a take. That is a take. So getting more into Carol Dweck's work, I'm going to show a little video here. But first, I just want to pause for just a second, just to let what you just said sink in. Globally, we've been pushed out of our comfort zone. So I think we see the skies over Beijing and the water in the Venice canals. We see the sea turtles laying their eggs, the lack of traffic. Obviously, there are unintended benefits. And the more we can reflect and pause, there's just so much wisdom in what you just said. I want to just call out a few people that are here. Emily from New York City, Kibbard and Walter Brown from New York, and a lot of international people that are joining us. Rachel, Mark Templeton from South Africa, Roel Jacobs from Belgium, Graham Allen from England, Alexander Tsang from Hong Kong, and who knows what time it is in Hong Kong, folks. It's late there. Obviously, Megan Pomeransky is always with us from Winnipeg. Megan, it's good to have you here again. Josh Luster from Italy. I think I mentioned Mark Templeton from South Africa, Kayleen from South Africa, Rachel, one of our faculty in Europe, is here from London, Rachel Locke. So many people from all over, Tomas Regas from Switzerland, Josh Boslow from the United Kingdom, people all over the United States, Marianne Harrington, welcome. We have such an amazing group of people from all over. And what you just said, globally, we're being pushed out of our comfort zone. When we think about evolution, it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most adaptable. We're being forced to adapt. how did the hominoid species emerge? It was stress. There wasn't enough food. There was global cooling. There wasn't enough available food sources. And so we needed to locomote. We needed our feet to start to work in a unipedal fashion to help us cover more ground to find available food sources. So we developed the two arches in the foot. We developed the springy arches. We developed the lateral hip stabilizers. We developed the full lumbar arch in the lumbar spine that people are afraid of nowadays. We developed the posterior fascial line, anchoring our plantar fascia to the nuchal line so that we could lean forward and jog. All these things occurred around 7, 8, 9 million years ago and facilitated the freeing of our hands and the expansion of our gigabytes of resolution of our incredible brain power. But were it not for stress, were it not for global cooling, none of this would have happened. So today is like this moment. It's unprecedented. My son's, has asked me, has anything like this ever happened before? And to your point, I've asked my dad, Rachel, is this like World War II? It's an opportunity. We exist in chaos, but we go about our business staying in our comfort zone. Well, now, thank you very much, COVID-19, we can't. We've got to figure out a better way to navigate, a better GPS for handling the uncertainty of our times. And I think your work on the growth mindset, as you teach us about the nuances of Carol Dweck, really help articulate that architecture and give us something tangible. So I want to play this video real quick.
But I'm going to tell you, that's totally fine. Okay, how do we get women to look for a mate? I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to tell everyone, or just in general, how do you get your clients to not have that fear? It's the way that you communicate with them can make a huge influence. They're influenced by many other things. Instagram, they're influenced by many things. Yes, in fact, Jason.
Your most powerful phrase is not yet.
Yes.
You're doing very well, but you're not.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, not yet. Not yet. If somebody's failing, this is in the book by Dweck. She says the most powerful thing you can say is, yeah, you can't do that yet, but we're going to keep working. Also, how do you praise your athletes or clients? How do you praise them? You say, wow, you're super strong. Or you say, wow, you must have worked really hard to get that strong. You just put it in their mind. I will never, ever, a guy that throws 100 miles an hour that's 16. There are plenty of kids that are 16 years old that throw over 90 miles an hour. That's really hard in case you're not a baseball fan. They throw over 90 miles an hour at the age of 16. That's really hard. Okay, you'll never, ever hear me, which you hear all the time. They come back in the dugout after an outing. You hear all the time, coaches be like, damn, you just lit up the radar gun. You just threw really hard. Like, wow, you threw really hard. Wow, these kids don't have any idea how they got through that hard. So praising something that they haven't worked for or they don't know how they got there, that's not good. You'll never hear me say, oh my God, you're so strong. I will say, wow, you worked really hard to get that, didn't you? I'll put it in their mind. This is how we're going to get there. I'll put it in their mind. It's okay to fail by telling them, hey, just so you know, you're coming in with a little back injury. Just so you know, you might have to work through some pain here. So when the pain does come up, and that's a failure too, right? Or that's a mental setback. Failure is a broad term. It's a mental setback. Sometimes people that get injured feel like they failed themselves or their body has failed them. So you can set the tone early by saying, hey, you're coming in with a little back injury. I just want to let you know, if you feel some pain, I expect that's totally fine. We're going to keep working through that. Even if you have some pain on that date, we're going to sit down, we're going to breathe for 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to get back up and do body weight squats. So that when they do it, they don't freak out. Can you change the way that your client acts and feels by the look on your face? Haven't you, how about when, I know people have been in situations, you've been in the field long enough, how about when somebody fails a back squat and the athlete, the first thing they're going to do, they fail, the weight dumps, loud noises, everyone's looking at them, the first thing they're going to do is look at you, coach. And are you like, oh my gosh, or are you are you totally calm? You're like, okay, cool, let's get that bar back up on the rack, you're going to do another rep. That changes everything. I can't remember if I have a video in here, so if I don't.
So Rachel, I love that. It's okay to fail. You want to accent anything from that video?
Yeah, just like you almost have to set the expectation of failure. And so something I talked about in that talk and expanded on in other talks on this is you absolutely have to tell them ahead of time, you're going to fail because I believe in I believe in what your potential is. I'm setting high expectations for you. Because I'm setting high expectations for you, that means that I expect you sometimes not to meet them. And that's okay because I've set the bar so high. If you meet every expectation that I've set for you, I've set the bar way too low because that means you're not getting better with me. So the first thing is almost set the expectation of failure. Don't set the expectation of success. Come to me, you're going to have no pain. You're going to feel great. You're going to move. You're going to get stronger. You've just said all these things. You've made all these promises, which might be true. You're going to move better. You're going to get stronger. You might get out of pain, but the journey to get there, as we know, is not always a straight line. And so as clinicians, we're promising, as coaches, clinicians, bosses, we're promising the end result without giving them promises of the journey. So right away, I mean, with athletes and with clients, you say, like I mentioned in the video, pain is a big thing too, because God forbid someone comes in and during the session, you're pushing them through a new position, you're pushing them to some kind of different volume they haven't experienced, some kind of different intensity, which by the way is your job as a coach and a clinician to get them better. And there's a little tweak, there's a little pain. Oh, what was that? Don't promise them that they're never going to have pain with you. I mean, obviously that's like the marketing ploy, but it's like that's setting them up for a bigger failure, which is disappointment disappointment because they don't have perfection or they don't have a smooth journey. So with athletes, to give you a more like specific example, with the Astros, when we first signed this very, very young group of Latin American players, age 16, I showed a bunch of videos in the talk in the fall, that I actually told them, we made the dynamic warm-up so difficult. And I don't mean physically, I mean so specific. The movements that they had to complete, they had to be technicians in their technique and their movement. And if they didn't do it right, they were going to have to start over again. So we told them, look, we're holding you to a high standard. We know you're going to fail. And we actually gave them a strategy for when it happened. So ahead of time, we already said, we know our expectations are so high because we believe in you so much that you're going to fail at some point. So we actually gave them a strategy ahead of time before they failed to handle that. So for example, in the dynamic warm-up, they would go through the dynamic warm-up and inevitably 1 or 2 times per day, I mean, a lot at first, but even once we got going, 1 or 2 times a day, somebody would mess up, somebody would step with the incorrect foot or whatever that was. And we would say, all right, everyone back. And we gave them a failure strategy and they were to raise their hand and say, my bad. So they would raise their hand and go, my bad. And everyone would go back to the line. So that way, as I mentioned in the video, failure doesn't become this horrific thing where there's fear surrounding it, there's embarrassment, there's shame. Failure is a part of the journey, and you should promise that failure, or maybe even pain, which is a very probably taboo thing to do in the clinician's world, right? Hey, you might have some pain going through this, just so you know. So when the pain comes up, look at you and go, oh, my back hurts, I'm dying. They go, oh, I feel a little pain. That's what you were talking about, that I was going to feel pain, right? And you're like, yep. So you've already, before you even start the session, you can set them up for success by setting them up for failure.
Wow. You can set people up for success before the session by setting themselves up for failure. So we're talking about how one of the things that I don't know if it's in Carol Dweck's work explicitly in growth mindset, but one of the things I got out of Exos was how you really like to anchor to that idea about building failure tolerance. What was sort of the genesis for you of inculcating that mindset, Rachel?
Well, I think I mean, it's how I live my own life. And it's how I was raised, it's how I was coached. And definitely at Exos, that was something, definitely at LSU when I was there, that, like these early experiences in my career. First of all, that's probably how I even got the jobs at those places as a young person, but then just solidified the idea of like, there is no adaptation without stress. So let's not lie to our clients and ourselves and say, come to me and it'll be a really smooth process and then you'll be shining on the other side of this. And so, but also I haven't talked about this, so I do want to make a point of this, is like, you have to live the values that you're teaching. I believe that firmly. And I know that's also kind of taboo to say, hey, coaches, you're not training. You know, if you're not training and developing this mindset for yourself and pushing yourself physically, whatever that means, I don't care whatever that means. I know Mark is a biker, and Coach Tommy Moffitt, head strength and conditioning coach at LSU, one of the most like alpha, crazy, psycho personalities I've ever been around. Okay. He like does biking, you know, in his office, and that's what he can do, because that's what stage of the game he's at, and that's what he wants to do. So I don't care what it is. I don't care if you're wheelchair bound and you're doing pull-ups in your wheelchair. I don't care what it is. Whatever you can push yourself to do physically, strive to gain that as a coach, as a clinician, because you are going to feel pain. You're going to feel soreness. So when your client experiences that, you can say, yeah, I actually understand what you're saying. Challenge yourself mentally. I don't mean reading another book, people. Look, reading a book doesn't mean that you're learning or that you're getting better as a coach. I'll give you an example. I had this conversation with a professional baseball coach the other day. He's like, what are you reading? What are you reading these days? And I'm like, well, I am reading some books. And I'm like, I'm not reading articles. And he's like, you're not? And I'm like, I'm going batting practice. You know why? Because what is going to get me better today as a coach is not reading an article about periodization. It's not. For me personally, everyone has to know this about what themselves. For me personally, to get better as a baseball hitting coach right now, I need to be able to throw better batting practice. And I'm not going to go into that a deep explanation why, but like, that's the skill that I need to get better at. So instead of spending an hour a day reading an article about whatever, fill in the blank, I go out and I throw batting practice every day. And that's how I'm getting better. So instead of reading another article about diaphragmatic breathing for an hour and then saying, well, I don't have time to train. I don't have time to train. That's some BS. You know, that's a foundational, for me personally, it's a foundational principle of being a coach of any physical type of anything, is you need to train your body, and that's going to look different for everyone, you know, at every stage of their career. But you asked what was the genesis of the growth mindset in my coaching? It's because it's how I live my life. And Carol Dweck talks about that in her book. The worst thing she talks about in her book, how to develop the growth mindset in athletes and students and your children. And she says the easiest way to develop a fixed mindset is as a fixed mindset and then they impose that onto their students. So how did that become like my coaching style? It's because that's how I've lived my life. And that's not that I've gained that myself. My parents, early coaches in my own athletic career, and then early mentors in strength and conditioning. One of the first things that was ever said to me at Exos was, do not be a guru. Do not learn one thing and that's the only thing that you know, because you'll be fragile. At Exos, they were lifting heavy. They were talking about elite level technique and movement. They were talking about therapies in the gym. They were talking about they were well-rounded. The genesis of like the well-rounded performance model, I think, with Exos and IMG and those early organizations. So that's how I was taught, and that's how I lived, and that's how I coach now.
That's amazing. I love how you focus on knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. So it'd be easy if one has an ego to just play to your strengths. But what they're saying by saying don't be a guru is don't assume you're the smartest person in the room. Focus on what you need to work on. And we've been sharing a video the last couple weeks from Dirty Harry. And I don't know if you know this part in Dirty Harry, but Clint Eastwood encounters his adversary, and the guy thinks he's gonna get away, and of course he's backing his car away, and it explodes, and Clint just sort of walks away, and he goes, "A man's got to know his limitations." And obviously that's his advantage, because Clint leaves nothing to chance. Dirty Harry leaves nothing to chance. He covers all his bases. How can you do that if you don't have a growth mindset? If you don't have that attention to all the aggregation of marginal gains? Where can I get the most from the least? Where can I make the most impact? It's my floor. And I want to lift up my floor. I don't want the Yankees to think that, you know, I couldn't throw them batting practice. I mean, that's amazing. That's a very humble way of looking at things. And hearing you talk about Carol Dweck and her very, very famous book, but bringing it to life in your own story about your childhood and how you were raised, LSU, and all these other great coaches. We see here John Wooden's quote, "If you're afraid to fail, you'll never do things you're capable of doing." We have to get past that. And of course, we see it in the clinic all the time. People that are focused on their pain, they're what we call, they have pain hypervigilance, or it's because of what they've been told. They've been told they have a sacral torsion or leg length inequality or a tight psoas, or they're bone on bone when they're not, or they should avoid squats. I mean, how can you tell people to avoid squats? If a 90-year-old can't squat, they go to a nursing home. How can we stop doing single leg work? When you're in your 70s, if you don't have good single leg, not just strength and balance, but speed of contraction, which is power, then when you trip, you're going to fall. When we trip, we catch ourselves. When a 75-year-old is going downstairs and they trip, they don't catch themselves. Why? Because they've been managed away from load.
Yeah.
Hospitals are so afraid of lawsuits that they manage everybody away from load, and then they have more people falling, but now they're vaccinated against a lawsuit because they're practicing defensive medicine, because they didn't get the person up. They didn't fall on my watch. No, they fell going to the bathroom. When they started being weaned from their opiates, now they were allowed to go to the bathroom on their own, but they were not prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not the activity that breaks people down, as Tim Gabbett says, is activity they're not prepared for. Yet we're always focused on the tissue, or we're micromanaging whatever we're a guru of. Fascial work, foam rolling, joint mobility, chiropractic adjustments, a certain exercise, instead of looking at the person and seeing what their mindset is, whether their floor is in their head because they're hypervigilant about pain, or they were told they can't squat, or every time they do a deadlift, they feel their back. And now they don't realize their ceiling because they don't get that at that edge. If we distinguish hurt from harm, that's where adaptation lives. So I want to show this video, another great video from Exos.
For each other and get a little hype and get a little like energy, or you want them to show up and then they're talking about, like, they're bitching about their style that needs money from them, you know, and they're all their problems and their girlfriend. Like, how do you want that to go? How do you want to set the tone for the day? And this is how every single day they came and did this.
All right, so tell us about the way you set the tone. I see you're doing a beast crawl with something on the back, which is something we use in gamification, and we call it a truth serum or lie detector. And we don't micromanage what they're doing and tell them to brace or lock their ribs to their waist. We just say, figure it out. Keep that cone on your back. But tell us a little bit about why it's important you set the tone with failure tolerance in the beginning.
So in this video, I'm talking about, like, I think the dynamic warm-up in sports, or just maybe in your clinic, you know, or in your personal training, you know, business, it's like the dynamic warm-up is like, okay, go ride the bike for 5 minutes, go jog around, get your heart rate up. But like, that is the first moment of the day. Like, that is how your day starts. That's how you set the tone. And so this is a part of the dynamic warm-up. And I want to make just one kind of side point of this is, like, the team dynamic is so powerful, and how you can get people to work together. And I know that's probably not that's not popular in a clinic setting where it's one-on-one and this and that. But if you could create a team environment, how powerful is that, where you might have a couple of clients that, you know, are similar, have similar stages, they're similar, maybe injuries or pasts or goals, then you can pair them together, or maybe even a group of 3. And obviously that would be even more economical for them. And then that would free up a couple of hours for you. And it's like, having that group setting is so powerful, because so what's happening in this video is, yeah, we're gamifying the movement for that kid personally, where we put a cone on his back and he's doing a lateral bear crawl. But what's even more important is that all of his teammates in the background are watching him. And if he drops that cone, the whole team has to start over. So the rest of that video, once he crosses the line, they all just like lose their mind. So what's funny is you've taken a kind of a, what I like to call zombie time of the day, where a lot of times you see like the dynamic warm up again in baseball. I'll just speak in our setting, but any sport really, the dynamic warm up becomes like, it's almost, you know, when you do something every single day and you do the same thing every single day, it becomes background noise. And we took the dynamic warm up that was 10 or 15 minutes. And it was, in some days, the dynamic warm up was like the most electric part of the day, which then sets the tone for everything you do after that. So their energy went from, okay, I'm thinking about my girlfriend, I'm thinking about my family, I'm thinking about whatever. And all of a sudden, like, that noise stops and the day has started, and we are starting the day right. And I don't mean physically. Now I'm talking about mentally. We are starting the day at an electric intensity, and they're cheering each other on, and they already feel this tribal sense of camaraderie before they've even started baseball activity. So I think the way, again, this is how are you communicating? Well, you don't even have to communicate. The title of that presentation was Constraints-Led Culture. You shouldn't even have to say a word, because as soon as they show up, their environment is such that it tells them exactly how they're going to feel and act and think. Because I don't have to say, hey guys, come on, get some energy in you today. Come on, it's Monday, great day today. Like, I don't even have to say that, because by nature of the fact that I'm asking them to do certain things and I'm telling them these certain tasks in a very specific way, their energy level rises automatically.
Wow, I'm I'm enthralled. We normally, after an hour, lose a few people in our audience, Rachel, and I always have a hard time selling any program where I have people like yourself that my audience doesn't know. But the beauty is that everybody that's here, these are the people that should be here, and everybody is really loving this. We're not losing any people, even as we go well past the hour mark. So I'm just gonna.
That's because the secret, Craig, is you just gotta drop some F-bombs and then people want to stay around.
It's not only that. I try F-bombs. It doesn't always work. This is from a post I saw somewhere about science and what science is, and it relates to your ideas about failure tolerance and being a generalist and exposing yourself to challenge, where you're going to find what your holes are. You have to be open to the idea that your beliefs might be false, because that's the only way that holding onto them can really mean anything. So we don't just assume we got it. There's nothing worse than the athlete who behaves in that fashion. Then they're done. They're never going to hit their ceiling. And this is from Homer. Difficulty is what wakes up the genius, which is exactly everything you're talking about. It's how you were raised. It's not about the comfort zone.
You gotta take a picture of that. That is so awesome. I like to say, like,
yeah, go ahead.
The only reason, like, I mean, the way that I talk, I speak confidently, right? And I've done that since I was 12. Like, I've had a confidence in me from sports and my parents and other things. But like, I do hear through the whatever, sometimes it's like, oh, well, that Rachel Balkovec, she's cocky. And I'm like, well, how is that even possible? How is that possible? If I was cocky, I wouldn't have gone back to school at age 30 and moved myself halfway across the world to go back to school, because I felt so stupid. Like, there's no way. But the only reason that I feel confident really is because I felt stupid for so many times, where I've been like, God, I'm so stupid. I have to keep learning. It's almost this like paranoia can give you confidence over the long run. If you just feel bad enough about yourself in the long run, you continually want to climb, then eventually you develop that confidence. But like, difficulty is what makes up the genius. I love it. It's wonderful.
So here you are, Rachel. You want to talk about your thought on this one?
How many, I can't see the whole thing, but how many times can you stand on the edge staring at the endless pit of uncertainty and still take the leap? I think I can't see the whole thing, but I think that's what that says. Yeah, it's what I just said though. It's like, I think again, it's in starting to coach professionals and coaching younger professionals. And I have a course dedicated to coaching young professionals. Like, the common question is, how have you made it to be a hitting coach in professional baseball? And it's like, because every time I'm terrified of something, I can look in the mirror and go, okay, Rachel, there's a reason why you're terrified. Like you have to go into that. And so it's like, how many times can you push yourself to the ledge and go, oh my God, this feels so uncomfortable, and then just leap off of the cliff into the abyss and figure out how to open your parachute on the way down. And I think that's like every single time, whether that's, okay, I'm going to move across the country to go work at Exos for free and stay in an intern house with 8 people. Well, all of my classmates were doing the local internship at their local performance facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I said, I'm going to go work at Athletes Performance. And they, at the time, of course, they said, what's Athletes Performance? And I was like, I'm going. So I went across the country to when I left LSU, and I was like, I want to do an internship in professional baseball. And everyone said, don't do that. Like, everyone was like, they might hire you as an intern. You're never going to get a full-time position. It's going to be hard for you to get to a manager's position. The players are never going to respect you, blah, blah, blah. Everyone said that, which is clearly uncomfortable. I was a young professional, age 23. I had everyone telling me this, and I was uncomfortable. I was on the ledge, and I was like, nope, see you guys later. And I just fall over the ledge and hope that everything worked out. And so it's like, how many times can you stare at uncertainty and go into that? So eventually the uncertainty becomes not just comfortable, not just, okay, I'm okay with this, but the uncertainty is like, yes, I'm going to go into that. And so when people are asking me how I'm doing with COVID, I've already jumped off the cliff so many times, and physically training, but also like financially, which people don't like to talk about, financially going off of a cliff and just trusting that work is going to pay off someday. And so during COVID, it's like, how are you doing? I'm like, I'm great. Because I've already been in so many uncomfortable, horrible situations most people would never put themselves in, but I've done them intentionally over a long period of time, which creates robustness from a mental standpoint. And we usually, again, talk about that with training, putting yourselves in different situations, stressful situations, so that you create a robust body. And a robust body is more resilient and better able to handle injury and stress. That's how that works with your mind too.
Wow. And you're describing Anti-Fragile, which is how we ended our last program with the great neuroscientist and physical therapist from Australia, Lorimer Mosley. There's a question from Matt Lowe, who was our panelist a few weeks ago from England. Do you believe that the growth mindset premise applies to all clients in all contexts?
I need a clarification of that. I mean, the first answer that comes to my mind is yes, but it looks different for Grandma Betty than it does for your professional athletes. It looks different, but it's all the same. And by the way, I mean, yes, you guys, sometimes I get people are like, well, I don't work with the people that you work with. You work with professional athletes. Wait. Let me just remind everyone out there that a large majority, again, 70% of my work, probably in professional baseball, I would say 70% of the hours that I've spent coaching has been with our Latin American players and our youngest Latin American players. So we're talking about 16-year-old children. I call them children, 16-year-old children that don't have a high school degree, that didn't grow up with a good house, with a good home life. Some of them didn't grow up getting 3 meals a day. And you're telling me that, oh, well, you work with professional athletes, it's different for Grandma Betty. I don't believe that, but maybe there's a more specific question. I don't know.
No, there is. So he also asked, first of all, he had a comment. This is from Matt Lowe in England. Absolutely love your intensity and fearlessness, Rachel. The blending of acknowledgement, empathy, and building resiliency. I think that's got a lot packed in it. And if you read Matt's blogs and his articles, you can see he's really somebody who's very thoughtful with his choice of words and a real student of the meaning of things. So this blending of acknowledgement of people, empathy towards them, but without being just sympathetic, you still have guidelines, you have standards, and build resilience is his point. But he asks another follow-up question. Let me just get this in there. How do you adjust your intensity to adapt yourself and your approach to an athlete who has a totally different mindset than you?
Okay, so what I just said, okay, that's a great follow-up question. Like what I just said is I am, get out of your mind that I work with the New York Yankees and these professional athletes, and get that, let's just clear that out, right? That's like that's a false perception of who I actually work with. I just said I work with 16-year-old Latin American players that don't have a high school education, and the education that they do have, even if they went to like their sophomore year of high school, is likely the level of like a 7th grade education in the United States. And I say that with love, and I truly love those guys like they are my sons. So I'm like, you know, I have to constantly adjust my approach, you know, but what I will say is I don't adjust the level of standards relative to each person. I'm going to hold everyone to a high standard because I view standards as love. My parents had high standards for me because they loved me, truly loved me. So they held me to a high standard. Whereas I think, especially in the sports performance world, we go, that coach is really intense. You know, that's not fair to those athletes that they're putting that level of What do you mean it's not fair? Isn't this your dream? Isn't your dream to be at the highest level of this sport? So if your dream is to be at the highest level of this sport, the best form of love that I can show you is giving you higher standards than even you yourself have imagined. But also, as Angela Duckworth says in her book, which you already put up there, I'll dive into this now. We get this so wrong. We have fucked this up so bad. She has this beautiful diagram, so simple. It's wise parenting. And you could probably just Google this online, wise parenting. And she talks about this as parenting, coaching, and teaching. So there's a diagram for, you know, I'm going to split, it's like this, okay? You know, there's quadrants, and you've got high support, high demand, and low support, low demand. And there's different quadrants you can fall in. So as a parent or a teacher or a coach or a clinician or whatever, if you are high support, low demand, that's not wise parenting. If you are high demand, low support, that's not wise parenting either. So high support, low demand, that's someone who goes, you're a special snowflake and whatever you need, and I know you've got 13 grandchildren and you've had 15 surgeries, and you know what, you're different than that professional athlete. We're not going to, that's not, I don't care. I saw somebody present, it might have even been at Exos, I forget, on a woman who's like 85 doing plyometric exercises. And the plyometric exercises were throwing like a 3-pound med ball against the wall as fast as she could. And that was her highest level. That was the highest standard she could be held to. And so she like couldn't even throw the ball to the wall the first time. And then she was doing sets of 10 or something like that. I forget, it was so beautiful. But that's an example of holding high standard for an 85-year-old woman. Well, there's a 16-year-old Latin American player without high school education. And there have been so many people that have told me they can't learn. They're not smart enough. You're being too hard on them. They don't get it. How horrible is that you're saying that person can't do it? So the standards look different for each person, but having high standards doesn't change. So last little bit of that is, okay, I just talked about low support. If you have high standards and you're that high demand parent or teacher or coach, she says you need to have equal support. You can have high demand, but you need to have equal support. So that's having the failure strategy. That's going, look, I love you so much. I'm going to have extremely high standards for you, but I know you're going to fail, and that's totally fine. I'm setting you up for success by setting you up for failure. I know you're going to fail because I put such high standards on you, and I'm going to give you a way to deal with that failure. So in the very literal sense, this is when we talk about failing with a back squat, right? I'm going to ask you to squat heavy weight, but I'm going to teach you how to drop the bar off of your back. So when you drop the bar off your back, it's not a big deal. I'm going to teach you that. So the first thing we did in our orientation with these players, and that I've done since whatever, 3 or 4 years ago with that, we literally practice failing in the weight room. So we put a bar on their back, empty barbell first, put a bar on their back, they squat down to a low depth, and then they pretend, they kind of come up, they pretend like they fail, and they let go of the bar, and it falls off of their back. Empty barbell. I know this is the deadliest sin. I don't care. Okay, and then we put 25 on either side, so 95 pounds or 85 if you have a women's bar. Then we do it again. We fail with a little bit more weight. We practice failure incrementally so that when I ask them, I have those high standards, and I say, no, I think you can put 20 more pounds on that barbell. And they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, no, I believe in you. I have this high standard for you. This is very, very, you can touch this. We've all been in this situation. No, I think you can do more weight. Okay, they put the weight on the bar. They sink down to the bottom. Now they've got 300 pounds on their back, maybe. They come a little bit up, and then they drop the bar, and they've already done that. They've already learned how to fail properly. So they're okay with failing when it's an actual stressful situation. So that is an example of again, I think we've all been in that situation as whatever you're in, where you've said, no, I think you can do a little bit more, whatever that is. And then they fail. But have you taught them how to fail? Have you provided that support? You have this high standard, you push them beyond what they think they can do. If you haven't provided that support on the same level, then the intensity is too high. The intensity is all relative. It's really like, you can have an incredible level of intensity and demand if you have an incredible level of support and an incredible system to allow them to fail safely, mentally and physically. Oh, that's a really good question, and I just ranted for a really long time, so I can't.
Awesome. That was awesome, and that was very similar to something that a few other people were asking as far as how to customize mindset, the mindset approach to people's emotions and things of that nature. But you have a standard, and one of your standards is you want to build failure tolerance. But you're a scientist. If everybody looks at this, we showed this in the first webinar. You got the horizon line, the 2 squares. Place your flat palm right across the midline where the horizon is. And what just happened when you now look at the 2 squares? In the beginning, they're different colors, they're different shades. And when you now put your flat palm bisecting the 2 squares right on the horizon line, what just happened to those 2 squares that originally were different shades?
The same, yeah.
They're the same. So things are not what they seem. And this is, I think, to your earlier point, Rachel, about something that you relish in these times where people are being brought to their edge. People can handle this. People can handle this. They need to be challenged, and this is going to make them better. We exist in chaos. That's reality. So if we start from that premise, then the why behind the what of why we want to challenge people is because that's how they're going to grow. That's how they're going to find out who they are and maximize their potential. And yes, you know, as you mentioned Maslow, it starts with safety. We have to create a safe environment, but then we want to challenge people. Otherwise, what is the purpose? So I want to share this video. We've shared it once before, but it really locks in everything you're talking about, especially your last points.
I think the principal element of science is actually failure. The way I look at science is that I try to fail as fast as possible. I want to make some idea not work as fast as I can so that I can move on to the next one, or by some kind of fortune, this idea survives all of my tests. That's what science is, surviving tests. And that's what we're trying to do when we're trying to directly detect dark matter or to infer what its nature is from astrophysical phenomena. We're trying to disprove ourselves. These failures are highly productive because we're still learning a lot about the universe. I think that the failures that we see in science are some of the most productive that I could imagine.
So Rachel, we have here a comment from Yuji Suzuki, who says, "I love this. How can we expect patient clients to take responsibility for their own health if we can't take responsibility for what we as clinicians and coaches provide?" So I think you're really striking a chord, and it's consistent with sort of what we've been building from the first webinar, and I thought had come to like a crescendo with Professor Mosley last time, but bridging the gap sometimes from the rehab pain space into the performance space really drives home that these standards are principles, and just how robust they are. I want to, before we head to the home stretch here, and we have about 30 minutes to go, I don't want to rush through all the content we have, but Rachel, we know that your time is precious, but I just want to ask you, so that we can kind of continue at this cadence. How do you feel about coming back and doing a round 2 with us in the future?
Oh, yeah, I'm up for it.
So that would probably be in like about 3 weeks-ish, as long as the Yankees haven't called you.
Yeah.
But I'd rather not rush, and we have so much to cover. So if you're up for it, I know our audience would love it. We'll probably even have a bigger crowd. We got people here like Marco Felja from Slovenia. I mentioned Alex Sang is from Hong Kong. Marianne Harrington Demock from Dallas, people from Portland. Ash Moshtar is here, I think, from Connecticut. There's a lot of people from Canada with us, lots of physical therapists, coaches. We have a lot of chiropractic students, chiropractors, people from all over the world. Graham Allen is here from England. So I really appreciate you're giving us this time. It's incredibly helpful for us to hear your perspectives. As a young coach who came up through Athletes Performance, you've been a D1 athlete. You're a woman in professional sports. You're a woman in a male-dominated world. Before we hit arm care and bands, which I really want to make sure that we delve into, but what can you say about your experience as a woman working in the elite level of sports and in male sports at that, how that's impacted you?
That's a really big question, Craig. I guess I would say, like, I mean, it's.
Well, how has it changed you? I mean, going to the Yankees, this is a huge step, and you've told me, and you've told the group, so I know I'm not sharing something that is a secret. It was a secret when you told me you were a Yankee, but that you aspired to become a general manager. So let's put it this way: what makes you want to get to that position in one of the biggest sports in the world?
I view myself as an entrepreneur, and I started to think like that maybe 5 years ago, but I just realized that in this profession, I mean, if you own your own business, this is different. You are the entrepreneur already, but if you're working for a sports organization as a strength and conditioning coach, I just talked about culture and growth mindset and failure tolerance, and I was implementing those in the dynamic warm-up, but that doesn't mean when they leave the dynamic warm-up and go to the field or the batting cages that they are getting the same messages. So I might be, and even though I had a phenomenal experience with the Astros especially, but like they might be getting a limiting mindset from sport coaches on field, or from the managers, or even from the administration, while I'm over here in strength and conditioning, and I can create that culture here, but it doesn't mean that I can create it elsewhere. And so being a hitting coach is something, by the way, that I have a lot to learn in. So I'm perfectly happy to spend some time in this, role. But I definitely see down the line as being an administrator or in a leadership position. But that's because it's like, I have always been called to leadership since I was very young. I mean, I was the girl on the high school team that the coaches gave the post-game talk, and then Rachel gave a post-game talk, like that was how that went. So, and so anyone who, I think the world is surprised, but like anyone who sees this that has known me from when I was young is like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. So the leadership, quality, is what I realized, that there's a ceiling in certain areas of the profession, in every area of the profession, unless you're owning your own business. If you're owning your own business, I mean, you're serving the clients, of course, but like you get to write the rules, and you get to hire your people, and you get to decide. Sometimes we don't feel this way, but you get to decide who walks through the door of your clinic and who does not. You can turn down clients, which I don't think happens a lot. So you get to decide that. If you are the strength and conditioning professional in a large organization, you're not deciding those things at all. You're deciding what happens once they come to the weight room, which is good. Sometimes you're not, by the way, deciding what happens when they come to the weight room. Sometimes that's also being decided by other people. But you can, my point in saying this is I'm a person who's called to have a very broad impact. And I think from a 10,000 foot view, and I think big picture. And so I would like to be a part of the big picture in an organization.
Wow. So that's infinite potential right there. Who other than Mark has really fueled you to reach that high? And obviously your parents too, but who else in the industry has really opened you up to the possibility that you could go from a person whose applications were being ignored because you were a woman to somebody who actually wants to be the one deciding who gets in?
So Mark, I never interacted much with Mark at Exos. I was just I was impacted by his work, obviously. But before I even got to Exos, my original mentor, his name is Chris Frankel, and I lived with him and his family for 2 years. I mean, he's like, I was an apprentice seeing him live. I mean, he was reading articles all the time. He was training himself. He's a dad of 3 daughters, just entrepreneur. And then now he's the director of human performance for TRX. Just phenomenal guy. And I'll never forget, like, he's the one who even told me, he's like, look, when I was an undergrad, he was a professor of mine and then became my mentor. And I said, Frankel, where should I do my internship for undergrad? Because there were a few facilities in Albuquerque. This is how I even got to Exos. He was like, you need to go and work for the best in the world. Like wherever that is, this is where you need to do it. I said, well, where do you think is the best in the world right now to go and learn? And he said, athletes performance. And that's exactly what I did. And I think that from that, he put it in me early, is like, you should be trying to do the best thing in the entire world, or you should try to be learning from the best in the world, so that someday you can further this profession. You can further professional baseball. And so from the very beginning, I mean, when I was writing my cover letter and sending it off to professional baseball strength and conditioning coaches, I wasn't saying, I want to be a part of your organization and I want to help people. I was like, I want to further the field of strength and conditioning and professional baseball. Like I was like this grand idea, like I wanted to help. I wanted to push things forward in a very like large level from the very beginning. And I understood that my purpose was not to get someone stronger. From the very beginning, I understood that my purpose was not to help someone recover from an injury. My purpose was to develop young men through getting them stronger. My purpose was to help someone feel more confident and more robust and more anti-fragile through helping them recover from an injury. So I think people get their purpose wrong, I guess, because everyone says, oh, I want to help someone, or I want to help someone become an elite level athlete. That's not what I want to do. I want to maximize people's development. I want to maximize what professional baseball can be in a community, and how it can positively impact a community, a city, how professional baseball can positively impact the country, how we can start up schools in the Dominican Republic to help young women in the Dominican Republic. Our jobs are just vehicles to accomplish a grander purpose. Getting someone to recover from an injury is just a vehicle for developing confidence and for changing their life, not for changing their physical ability, but for making them more confident person so they can be a better husband, wife, father, mother. Like, we get our purpose wrong, I think. And so all the way back to your question is, what put that in me is, Chris Frankel was definitely a person who, he wants to change the world. And he's so under the radar. He's like, no one even knows who he is, probably. Some people know, but he's so under the radar. But he wants to make an impact and improve an entire field. And that was something that he probably put in me as a young professional that I've carried with me all the way through.
I love that you say we get our purpose wrong. So we begin to identify ourselves with our craft, or we identify ourselves with the silos that we're in. And it's probably another one of the things is getting back to basics here with the pandemic is really the reflection. You're in the mountains right now. So you've really isolated yourself. But that's sort of something that you go back to a lot to reboot. Isn't that true?
I think that one of the most powerful ways to know your purpose, because we talk about this all the time. Again, like, this is in the coaching, and I have a course kind of surrounding this. It's like, everyone says, well, you have to find your purpose. It's like, how do you find your purpose? Like, that's not tangible. You have to have steps. And thankfully, I say this, I've been alone a lot in my career, and I've been literally alone, where I moved to a new city and I don't have friends and I don't have a system of people, and I just have my colleagues sometimes. And I've moved so much, and I've had to let go of relationships. I've been literally alone. I've also been like even more literally alone, where I travel alone and I spend periods of time by myself. And I know not everyone has that luxury to be able to, I have spent months by myself traveling. Not everyone has that luxury, but you surely have the luxury of 10 minutes a day, even if you have kids. I don't care if you have kids. Put them on, get them outside, or not now, but I don't know, during COVID, but like, you have 10 minutes. And if you don't have 10 minutes, you're setting that standard for yourself. Just remember that. But alone time literally is important, but also figuratively for me as a woman in professional baseball specifically, like, I'm figuratively alone. There's no one that I can really turn to and ask. So I have to ask myself. I have to listen to my own thoughts. When you're by yourself, you have the opportunity, and I mean by yourself, like no podcasts, no music a lot of times that's distracting your thought process. When you're really by yourself and you have an opportunity, you allow yourself to listen to your own thoughts, that's when you can go, wait, what do I actually want to do? And that can sometimes be as simple as, what do I want to eat today? And that can be as grand as, do I want to start this business? Do I want to move to Europe? Do I want to make this grand decision? But these decisions, small and big, if you never have a chance to be alone and really ask yourself those questions, then you can't really know what you want to do. You can't really know how you want to serve this world. You can't really know your purpose. You can't even know your why. Sometimes we get to thinking and we're like, oh, God, when my mom said this to me when I was 15, these things come up for me. I'm like, whoa, I remember that my mom said this to me when I was 15. And I remember what kind of impact that had on me. But if you're never alone with your thoughts, whether that's literally or figuratively, not everyone's going to go live in the woods for 6 months. We can't do that in this society. But hopefully you can set aside 10 minutes a day or an hour a week of just silence so that you can reflect on your own thoughts. And I do think that not for everyone, but during this COVID time, that's also a great thing that's happened, is we have to be alone. But we're not even alone, because we're like, I'm alone. I can't be alone. What am I going to do? I'm going to play video games. I'm going to get on social media. I can't possibly be alone. I'm going to schedule 10 Zoom calls so I'm not alone. Like, wait, solitude and And loneliness doesn't have to be bad. You know, solitude is something that for thousands of years people have sought out. Spiritual leaders have sought out and preached that solitude is very important for mental health. And so on a smaller scale, it's like, how do you know your coming back? How do you know your purpose? Well, you gotta be able to ask yourselves those questions. And if you're constantly turning to your left and your right and going, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And you're listening to other people impose, by the way, their limiting beliefs on you, then you're never going to know what you actually want to do. You're never going to get to that deep level of understanding of your purpose in the world. You can't.
Wow. You know, it reminds me, I was at a meeting of CMOs and CEOs that a patient of mine invited me to, called Worlds. And one of the featured presenters talked about white space and asked, is there anything we can let go of? And I think that we're so caught in the rat race. We talked about this the last couple of weeks. We're so caught in the rat race. Are we really going to go back to the rat race? Like, how can we insulate ourselves? We know we're going back, but can we go back more robust? Can we go back feeling stronger about, like what you're saying, like, what are our standards? That's your culture. Can we go back representing our why? And maybe, you know, what you're saying is now is an amazing chance to develop a habit, to see what it's like, what it feels like, to just be in the moment, to embrace the white space. And then maybe we'll be able to more easily nudge ourselves later into recapturing that feeling again, because we do exist in chaos. The rat race is coming back, but maybe we can have more aplomb later because of this unprecedented situation right now.
Oh, I'm thinking to myself, like, are we learning from this? You know, are you appreciating your wife at home taking care of your kids more? Are you appreciating teachers more? Are you appreciating nurses and doctors more? Are you appreciating your health more? You know, are we learning from this? I hope so. You know, I really hope that we at least take lessons from this time.
Well, I want to get through arm care a little bit. Now that I know that we're going to do this again, maybe in 3 or 4 weeks, Rachel, I want to get through arm care because it sets up what we'll be covering when we get back together. And it really highlights a lot of your unique views, which only come from having your perspective, your unique perspective, which has nothing to do with you being a woman, but has to do with all of the things we're learning about you today. There's a very special way that you think about things, the generalist commitment, the failure tolerance, and this together really helps us to see maybe what we could do differently. And arm care really typifies that. But then before we finish, I want to get back to this idea of appreciation too, and that'll be a perfect way to end. But as far as arm care, you were writing, I once bought into the idea that overhead athletes should stay away from intense upper body lifting and that arm care meant a few band exercises in the training room. My thoughts on this complex topic have radically changed. The body is a system, and the use of the term arm care implies that you can isolate one part of the body and should be examined more closely. And of course, we know there's a spectrum of PRI, DNS, FMS correctives, band exercise, there's FRC, there's all of these methods. They're all incredible. But as Dr. Levitt said, don't be a slave of the methods. The method should serve the goal. What's the goal? The goal is resilient, robust performance that'll be there for the long haul. These young phenoms who are throwing over 95 miles per hour when they're drafted, or 98 or 100, and then are getting signed to long-term deals. Teams like the Yankees and Red Sox and Dodgers are invested in the long term. Yet, risks have to be taken because the status quo is broken. The incidence of UCLs is not going down, just like ACLs in the NFL, it's going up. And we know that we're at the limit of what the armor can handle. So these kids are throwing harder than ever before, so no wonder some of them are breaking. But it seems like with all the data, all the big data, there hasn't been any progress yet. And I feel like you're definitely a minority view. Your perspective, and the Yankees are showing some real vision, bringing you in. You're a minority view because a lot of these things about arm care, they are the status quo. And yet I look at Lorena Torres, and she says injury prediction, it's a waste of time. And she's one of our great PhD scientists in the athletic development field. Is a waste of time. We've been there, done it, and it failed. We spent 2 years and a lot of money trying to work this injury prediction model. It's too complex. So many different parameters are involved. When a player breaks down, we just can't get our arms around it. It's really not about reducing injuries. It's about managing injuries. And so she's quoting Strudwick there. So we're now embracing a new way of thinking, hopefully, and hopefully you're part of that pivot where we realize we exist in chaos. We start from the presumption that you can't just break the whole down into parts and then reassemble it again, something that Matt Lowe and I are going to address, hopefully with Daniela Vaz from Brazil in a few weeks. But complex systems are what we're dealing with. And there is an unpredictability. As much as we don't like that, to Lorena Torres' point, we don't like the unpredictability, but if we're scientists, we have to become more failure tolerant about the inability of even our best methods and quote unquote systems to crack the code. So you gave an amazing talk on arm care, and I don't know where this was posted. I think you posted it, but somebody was saying this girl has more resilient shoulders than a lot of athletes that I've worked with. And so here's a little talk, and then I want you to talk about this talk because you just nailed it here.
Mini bands or whatever else you have is actually a little bit ludicrous. So we are getting strong in the weight room. We're already doing arm care. Doing a pull-up is arm care. That's strengthening your arm. Doing a military press, for God's sake, that is arm care. You know, doing a snatch is arm care. Strengthening your shoulders and your arms is obviously very important, but then to say arm care, again, I just want to polish that term from a mental standpoint for athletes. To say we're going to do arm care, we're going to do shoulder care, is alluding to the fact that when we step into the training room or into the clinic and we do band work with tubing, that's actually what's saving the arm. So we're alluding to that. I would like to abolish the term arm care and just talk about body care and holistic care of the entire body to care for the extremities. I think we're pretty much out of time. Any questions?
So I'm going to skip these, Rachel, but they just sort of show some ideas of different approaches that are out there about, to your point, about not just focusing on the articulation, but focusing holistically on the whole body. Here you see Lachlan Wilmot, one of the great performance coaches in Sydney, doing something that Pavel Satsaline, Carmen Bott, and others teach as far as getting the core involved, getting the torso involved, developing that stiffness, and working the whole body as a unit. Of course, we see here Gracie in the tremendous sit-through move from jiu-jitsu. But would you amplify your that capsule summary from Exos for us, please?
Yeah, I, in summary, do not believe in arm care. I believe in just the term. And I mean, I think that we all understand what that means. And like, there's a time and a place where after surgery or when there's an acute injury or whatever, like there's a time and a place to isolate joints. I think we all understand that. But the fact that arm care is like, we tell our athletes, we tell our baseball players, okay, you're going to lift weights and then you're going to go do your arm care. It just sounds ridiculous. Like, why would we, that's again, the verbiage that we're using, the idea that we're giving to them is that you can truly protect one joint by doing these few exercises. And you mentioned DNS and FMS and PRI and every other acronym out there. I think those are wonderful tools for a foundation and also a great example. So the kind of the rest of that video, or part of what I did there, is I think we did the measurement where you lay on your back, you lift your arm overhead into shoulder flexion, and you kind of check your mobility. And then we did a breathing exercise. And then I had everyone recheck their mobility, and their mobility increased. And I think that probably everyone on this phone call understands that concept, right? Like diaphragmatic breathing is going to change the nervous system. The nervous system controls a lot of your joint range of motion sometimes. And so if you're breathing correctly, or if you're in a relaxed state, you're going to have more joint range of motion because your body feels safe. So why in the heck are we preaching arm care, like these shoulder exercises with bands and like tiny little dumbbells as arm care, when breathing improves your shoulder mobility? So on the mound, if I'm really going to protect myself as a pitcher on the mound, maybe the best thing that I can do is actually do diaphragmatic breathing exercises in between innings. So I make sure that my mental anxiety level in a game isn't affecting my mobility physically, which is going to affect my health. So I think that that's just one example. By the way, I already talked about this in the talk, but this is incredibly backwards thinking to go, okay, we're going to lift weights, which might include, let's just say, an incline bench press, some kind of pull up, a row, or whatever, upper body exercises, even deadlift, by the way, bracing, being in those positions. Okay, now we're done lifting. Okay, now you're going to go do your arm care in the training room. That just makes no sense to me. It hasn't for a long time. And just the words arm care, I don't agree with, because that's telling the athlete or the client or whatever, oh, we're going to isolate this joint and that's how we're going to care for your arm. That's counterintuitive to the understanding of the body as a very complex system. We can't just do a shoulder exercise and go, okay, now we've taken care of your arm. We have to do many more things, including many different types of movements and breathing, to make sure that all of our joints are healthy and working in synchronicity.
Thank you. And I want to add that when we did the breathing retraining, your breathing retraining, Rachel, was incredibly effective at improving shoulder elevation across the board. And yet it was, I would say, sans voodoo. There was no huge protocol there. It wasn't some deep dive into very sophisticated breathing exercises. It was just really awareness, which to me is what yoga is. Yoga is about getting in touch with yourself. It's about connecting your mind and your body and just becoming conscious. So if you become aware of how your abdomen is moving when you breathe in, and how when you breathe in, the abdomen rises, and when you breathe out, the abdomen falls. And if you can feel how much your chest is moving versus your abdomen without judgment, that agnostic approach is really what yoga is. Yoga is not about judgment. Yoga is about consciousness. And of course, it also has the second benefit, which is what you've talked about already, about finding silence. So maybe these people are just so amped up, these ball players. There's so much pressure that just getting them to disengage, improve the mobility, because what blocks mobility more than thoracic kyphosis and shoulder shrug? And what is the shoulder shrug but a held in sigh? It's an inhalation dominant movement, which is a cortisol driven movement. It's a sympathetic state. And what do these athletes need? They need what LeBron gets, what Kawhi gets. They need recovery. They've earned the recovery, but that doesn't mean it's a fixed type of recovery. So can you just say what inspired your really basic, distilled approach to something that most people go off the deep end with respect to breathing?
I mean, again, I don't really say lucky a lot, but I was so lucky early in my career that I was exposed to like a well-rounded, practice. And I took yoga in college, and it wasn't just like, oh, I took yoga in college and I didn't, we had a phenomenal instructor who taught us about diaphragmatic breathing. And she was just like, she really exposed us, including myself. I was still a college athlete and I had to take yoga in my exercise science curriculum. And I had this phenomenal teacher who preached to us the importance of diaphragmatic breathing for joint health, and not just like, oh, you're a tree and we're meditating, but not woo woo, as you said, Craig, not that, but actually how you can improve the body's function through that. And so I was exposed to that pretty young. And then I went to PRI, and then I was exposed to DNS with the St. Louis Cardinals. But diaphragmatic breathing is not new. It's been around for thousands of years and have been used in spirituality for a long time. So it's not new. The health benefits are not new. And I think it's just, for me, going back to all the way to the beginning of like, don't be a guru. Diaphragmatic breathing is important. So is lifting heavy. So and I think it's Kelly, I don't know if Kelly Starrett coined this phrase or not, but he says, if you can't breathe in a position, you don't own the position. So a lot of times I think the pendulum has swung to, we've got these cute exercises and and teaching how to do things lying on their back. And then we go, okay, now we're going to stress the system. Now we're really going to stress the system. We're going to go over here and do this cable row while you breathe. That's not sport. Sport is getting knocked around, being extremely explosive, being in different positions, and so training, I think using those foundational principles of breathing in intense training, and I'm getting fascinated by this, and this is probably some people will get off of here after this, but in the sport of CrossFit, and how the truly elite level athletes in CrossFit are incorporating breathing and knowing their positions, and like they are in the most one of the most stressful sports as far as like just the demand on their system, and they are incorporating breathing into that. And like that, again, is all relative. If you're working with an 85-year-old woman or man, that's going to look different. That level of intensity looks different for them. But how do you apply these? I called them cute. I don't mean to be offensive, but just like, how do you apply these low intensity concepts to high intensity environments?
I love that. This is, I think, a misnomer of thinking, for instance, that all this training on the ground is going to transfer. Training on the ground, like in jiu-jitsu, is a movement prep, and their sport is on the ground, but it could be part of prehab and rehab for upper quarter issues. But spending all this time on the ground, when we're talking about athletes that aren't just bipedal, how often is an athlete bipedal? Athletes are unipedal. When we just walk, 85% of gait is on one leg, and athletes are developing incredible speeds of firing of muscles to generate power, and then they're breaking it. I want to know how my athlete or patient is breathing when they're under stress.
Yeah,
that's what I want to know. So just to bring this to conclusion. Obviously, we're going to get into the lifting question, which dovetails with the correctives next time. And we're going to go over some of the other topics at a nice pace. But the tone that you set today of transparency and humility, and holding everybody, including yourself, but all the people around you to a standard, and creating an environment where we're taking responsibility, accepting blame. It's our fault. If they don't learn, it's our fault. We didn't set up the right environment. I think you're underscoring the overall that each person has, sort of the why purpose. If we can create safety, that's showing appreciation more than anything. If we can challenge people, if we can set a standard for people, that's becoming the best parent or coach we can be, according to the 2x2 model of Angela Duckworth. And right now, of course, it's a reflective time and a serious time also. And I saw this, this is about our healthcare workers around the world, about this woman outside of Barcelona, Nuria Burlo Aravalo. When intensive care unit nurse Nuria heard about the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan, she never thought it would reach her small city of Tarragona, Spain, some 100 kilometers west of Barcelona. But 1 month ago, the virus hit her city hard. Within 1 week, her hospital went from having 1 case of COVID-19 to 14 seriously ill patients, including young people without any underlying conditions. Since March, 63 members of the hospital staff have been infected with the virus. And so we see a picture here of Nuria taking a break with her colleagues at her university hospital at about 4 a.m. in the middle of her shift. And so this is going on all around us, and it is a time for reflection. It is an unprecedented time, and it's remarkable that we could have an audience from all over the world, from Cyprus and Slovenia, from Hong Kong, from Poland and Belgium, and different places all over the world, Rachel, to learn from you. And one of our audience members is a self-professed member of the Alfred team, Giovanni Frapporti, from Verona in the north of Italy, which is one of the areas that was struck the most heavily. And this really strikes a chord with me. Giovanni is a chiropractic student who had to leave Davenport. I mentioned him earlier. He's with us today. This is a picture of his dear father, and the homemade protective uniform that his mother made for his father. Photo of my dad. He's a family doctor. 70% of COVID-19 patients are being treated at home to deload the burden from the hospitals. The gear he is wearing is not a real protective one. My mom sewed it for him with shower curtains. They were born in 1952, and it would no longer be an age to be heroes, but they are forced to do it. So your background, Rachel, and your upbringing, the foundation you have, we see it just is permeating the words that Giovanni is sharing with us here. And Giovanni had to go home. His father passed away. And we all are going to be touched by this. But can we give this some purpose? Can we see that there are some unintended benefits? Can we see the cleaning of the air? And even though we know we'll go back to the rat race, can we somehow go back with more mindfulness? And I think you've given us a lot to think about, Rachel. I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing. I know you've exceeded everybody's expectations today. We've hardly had a fall off, and we're at exactly the 2-hour mark from when we started. So I want to thank Aaron. I want to thank Geronimo, our students, for making this happen. I want to thank Ryan from New York City, my partner. And I want to thank you, Rachel, so much on behalf of our whole audience from all over the world. You're a blessing to us, and thanks for sharing in such a brutally honest and thoughtful manner. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. This is a blast.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a safe and healthy week.
Bye.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.